I first started making cheese, I followed all the rules. But the rules, a lot of them weren't very necessary. In fact, some of them were actually deterring me from making good cheese. Hi, my name is Jennifer. In this video, I am going to tell you about 7 commonly recommended cheese making practices that may be ruining your cheeses. This is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but feathers are meant to be ruffled. Have you ever seen chickens taking a dust bath? Consider this your cheese making dust bath. Number 1, reconsider pasteurized milk. I know that many cheesemakers advise you to use pasteurized milk when making cheese, but the process of pasteurization, heating up milk to kill off the bad bacteria, also kills off the good bacteria. With fresh, unprocessed milk, it has both the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. And when handled properly, the good bacteria actually keeps the bad bacteria in check. It is so cool. So while pasteurized milk is safe, it is also weak. Where milk from the cow or the sheep or the goat is strong, it's vibrant, it's practically buzzing with cheese-making energy. And cheeses that are made with fresh unprocessed milk have a better curd set, they have a more nuanced flavor profile, they age more quickly, and they're just all around more hefty and fun and rewarding to work with. Yes, you can absolutely make wonderful cheeses with pasteurized milk. One of the guys in my cheese making group, he makes the most wonderfully creamy cheeses with his pasteurized milk. But to anyone saying that it is best practice to use pasteurized milk for cheese making, I say hogwash. Number 2. Use your hands. Ditch the spoon and stir the curds with your hands. Using your hands will give you a better feel for how they sink, how they clump, how they move in the pot, how juicy they are, how much whey is still in them, how much they have actually cooked. If you have an ick reaction to stirring cheese with your hand, get over it. If you're concerned about arm hair, scrub your arm down really good with a scrubby and soap, and it'll get off all the loose hairs, and then just use it. It's gonna be okay. Listen, there is bacteria, good and bad, everywhere. Even in a cow's udder, there is bacteria. It is not sterile. And that's not bad, that's just how it is. I think people often view milk as something dangerous. It's to be feared and handled and managed. But milk is our friend. Get cozy with it, bond with it, tell it all your secrets. The more you learn to trust and respect your milk, the better your cheeses will be. Number 3, do not aspire to work in a sterile environment. Clean environment? Yes, please, by all means. But sterile? No. Cheese making is meant to be done at home on a small scale, daily, and in the chaos of ordinary working kitchens. Attempting sterility will 1, kill the mood, 2, be nigh impossible, 3, make your life way too complicated, and 4, wipe out the good bacteria that can actually benefit your cheeses. In active working kitchens, there's lots of stuff going on. If you wipe that clean, you lose some of the natural power, the natural goodness of what is in your environment. Consider sourdough. In a kitchen where sourdough is regularly made, those yeasts are in the air. So if you are doing sourdough regularly, you actually can set out flour and water, stir it together, and over the course of several days, you can actually bring in the yeast that you need to bring that starter alive and to create a starter. Because it's in the air, it lives there. And the same is true of cheese. It actually used to be that cheeses were made in wooden containers or like barrels. That wood that the cheese was made in actually absorbed the culture. And so the barrels were not washed, just the cheese was taken out and fresh milk was added. And that just kept the process going. That's how they cultured their cheeses. So when we start using chemicals that are stronger than just soap and water, we begin to lose some of the natural bacterial goodness that doesn't actually hurt our cheeses and can maybe actually improve them. Number 4, don't follow prescribed times. I used to think I had to follow the times down to the second. It had to be exactly what they said to get the exact type of cheese, and no. I mean, it is true if I'm trying to make the same cheese every single time, I do have to follow that same process. But for home cheesemakers, using those times as a guide rather than as like a rule that you have to follow, it actually reduces stress and often results in cheeses that are better. When my children were little, I was really concerned with making sure they learned the right thing at the right time. And it was stressful for the child, for me, for everyone. But every time I was able to gradually relax my strict adherence to what I thought needed to happen when, and shift my focus to the child, then I was finally free to actually see the child and enjoy the child. It was such a relief. Cheeses aren't much different from children. When you learn to see the cheese, to work with the cheese, to know what you're looking for to bring about a good cheese into the world, the whole process shifts. And yeah, your cheeses might not be the same every time, but your understanding of them and the flavor and the quality of your cheeses will improve. There's a couple reasons why paying attention to the cheese more than the strict rules is so important. First of all, milks are different. Cow milk is different from goat milk, is different from sheep milk. Pasteurized milk is different from natural unprocessed milk. And even within the natural unprocessed milk, you're gonna have variations because of where the cow is in her lactation, what time of the year it is, what they're eating. There's so many variables. So if you can learn to look at the milk to know what to expect, your cheeses will be better. And second, it's just always beneficial to know what a cheese needs to be a happy, thriving cheese, more than the specifics of the recipe. This is why in my videos, I'm committed to showing some of the details that I think often get skipped over, like the stirring of the curds and testing them, tasting them, smelling them. That's how you begin to develop a feel for cheeses. And that, in the long run, is going to help you adapt and develop them in ways that are best for them. Number 5, powdered lipase is of the devil. Okay, not really, but yeah, sorta. Lipase is an enzyme that is naturally occurring in fresh, unprocessed milk. You can buy it in powdered form to add to pasteurized milk when you make cheeses. Lots of recipes call for lipase, like manchego and asiago and parmesan, but don't do it. Because see, lipase in powdered form, when added to milk, can give your cheeses the taste of vomit. But here's a little science. I just read this recently and I found it so interesting. Rennet comes from the fourth stomach of a calf. There are different methods of processing that fourth stomach. There is often curdled milk or cheese in that stomach. So they clean out that cheese, wash out the stomach, and they dry it and salt it, and then they use that stomach to make the rennet. Another method is to take the stomach with the curdled milk and the cheese still in it, dry it out, salt it, and then use all of that to make the rennet. The second version, which has the cheese, also has a lot of the lipase enzyme in it, which results in a rennet that gives more flavor and nutrition to the final cheese. So people who process their calves' stomachs and get their rennet that way, their cheeses have that lipase flavor with the powdered form. It's not the same. At least I hope it's not the same. I don't know if I've ever had those cheeses. Powdered lipase is actually good when you add it to fresh cheeses that are not aged, like mozzarella. It gives them a mild flavor boost, a good flavor boost. And so, you know, just proceed with caution. Number 6, think twice before adding rennet, and then maybe cut it in half. It took me years, but I finally figured out that I have been using too much rennet in my cheeses. Recipes are geared toward cheeses made from pasteurized milk, and those recipes requires more rennet. But because I'm using fresh, unprocessed milk, I can get away with actually cutting the rennet in half to 1/8 teaspoon per gallon of milk. And my cheeses, as a result, have become much less rubbery, much less tough. They're more creamy. They're just a better texture all around. And I'm saving money on rennet. So, you know, win-win. I make my cheeses from fresh, unprocessed milk. That's what I do. That's what I know. That's what I'm talking about. If you're using milk that has been compromised by heat treatment, that's totally fine. But just be aware that if you're using pasteurized milk, some of these things that I'm saying may not be the most helpful to you in your particular situation. Be smart. Choose your mentors wisely. Get educated. Oh, and one thing I've been wanting to tell you, for the last couple months, I have been working on a document called The Foundations of Cheesemaking. It's a glossary of sorts, a Milkslinger specific glossary. It digs into all the details about cheesemaking and explains much of the things that I can't or don't always say in my videos. So this resource is kind of like a companion to the videos. In this glossary, I talk about the problem with lipase, or when to adjust the rennet, the different types of brine solutions and when to use them, what herbs and spices you can add to your cheeses, the different types of whey and which one can be used to make ricotta. This Milkslinger Foundations doc is completely free. There's a link for it below this video and also at milkslinger.com. I created this document because I really am committed to helping you make cheeses as efficiently and successfully as possible. Go on, click that link and get yourself that doc so you can go on your way to making really good cheeses. Number 7, ditch the freeze-dried cultures. You don't need them, people. I'm serious. We have been taught that once you get the milk out of the cow, it starts degrading, it becomes contaminated, and then that's the end of it. It's dangerous. Don't touch it. The act of making cheese is a fight against this death spiral. So we're heating the milk to kill the bad bacteria, making sure we work in a sterile environment so that everything is perfectly good for this milk that is going to die at any second. We add a multitude of very specific cultures to get exactly what we want because we've killed things off, and so we have to put it back in and make it just the right cheese. It's kind of exhausting. But the thing is, cheesemaking, the natural cheesemaking that has been going on for hundreds of years the world over, is not a downward spiral to death and destruction. See, cheese is a fermented food. And as with any fermented food, it's cyclical. Think about sourdough. I keep going back to sourdough, but that's because there's so many similarities. If you have a sourdough starter, you feed it, it becomes active, it gets weak, it starts to die off, and then you feed it again. And so it just is like this constant circle of life and death. And it's the same with cheese. It's a fermentation cycle. But here's what's interesting. Modern cheesemaking practices do not recognize cheese as a fermented food. In fact, our current modern day cheesemaking practices are mainly based on science from the 1960s. I don't think freeze-dried cultures are terrible. Yeah, there are plenty of reasons to avoid them. There's a delay in their activation, which makes them more susceptible to unwanted bacterial growth. They ferment slower. They're susceptible to bacteriophage viruses. They're produced by faceless conglomerates. They use tons of packaging and shipping and resources. They're freaking expensive. But they do work. I have a big stash in my freezer. A lot of them are probably already expired, but I use them when I need to, and they're easy and they make really good cheese. But here's why I'm encouraging you to consider trying a natural starter culture. Using a natural culture requires a shift in how we understand milk. It's probably the number one thing that has impacted my approach to cheesemaking in a positive way. Using a natural culture has allowed me to see cheesemaking from a new perspective, as a fermented food, as a strong food, as something not to be feared. And now I am realizing how my inability before actually deterred me or prevented me from making good cheese at home. I've actually done a whole video on the main natural culture starter that I use for all my cheeses, both mesophilic and thermophilic. So if you want to learn about that culture and how to save money and how to start it for yourself and how to make really good cheeses with it, then watch this video next.